Hello, sweeties. This is Janay. This is Astrology, and this video is part 1 of my How to Read a Birth Chart series. So if you're a beginner to astrology, you know absolutely nothing about birth charts, by the end of this series, you will have enough information to begin the birth chart reading journey. Of course, to really acquire the skill, you'll need lots and lots of practice, looking at your own chart, other people's charts, but you will get there eventually, and soon enough, reading a birth chart will be like second nature to you. So part 1 of the series will cover the symbols of astrology, also known as the glyphs of astrology. So we're going to go over the signs and the planets, and I guess we'll just start with the signs. This is the glyph for Aries. It is pretty easy to remember because it literally just looks like the horns of a ram, and Aries is the sign of the ram. This is the glyph for Taurus. It is the head and the horns of the bull, and Taurus is a sign of the bull. So again, this symbol is pretty easy to associate with Taurus. This is the glyph for Gemini. It's pretty interesting because it looks like the Roman numeral 2, and Gemini is the sign of the twins, and twins are a set of 2 babies. That's not like the history of the glyph, but it's just how, when I was first learning astrology, how I learned to associate, the glyph for Gemini, the twins, with, the sign of Gemini. This is the glyph for Cancer. In my opinion, I don't really think it looks like a crab at all. I saw it described as, it's the claws of the crab. But when I was drawing this glyph, because I drew out all the symbols just so I could, process them in my brain from a kinesthetic way instead of like solely a visual way. But when I was drawing the glyph for Cancer, I actually thought of like embryos, which is interesting because, of course, Cancer is a sign of fertility and motherhood. So maybe that can help you associate this symbol with Cancer, or maybe it'll just gross you out because for some reason people are grossed out by human life. But yeah, that was just a fun little connection to the glyph of Cancer. This is the glyph for Leo, and Leo is the sign of the lion, so it's pretty simple because, it looks like a lion if you have a little bit of an imagination. You have the lion's head there, and, that big curve or swirl, whatever you want to call it, that's the mane of the lion. And of course, Leos have big manes of hair. Leo is a sign of hair, so it's pretty easy to remember. This is the glyph for Virgo. There isn't really any symbolism within the glyph that can help you relate it back to the Virgin, unless you happen to know the ancient Greek alphabet, because that's where the symbol originally came from. But unfortunately, this is just one of the symbols you'll have to memorize. But the good news is that it doesn't take a lot of work to memorize the signs, so you'll be recognizing the Virgo glyph in no time. This is the glyph for Libra. It is, a scale. It's super easy to remember. And while doing some research, I also came across a description that noted that the glyph for Libra was also a sunset. And I thought that was wonderful because, of course, Libra is the 7th sign of the zodiac, and in a birth chart, the 7th sign is the descendant, and the descendant is where the sun is setting. So I thought that was just a beautiful connection to the actual symbol for Libra. This is the glyph for Scorpio. You can recognize this because it has a little tail with an arrow, and that's kind of like the scorpion's stinger. It also reminded me of a devil tail. And of course, Scorpios are really evil and scary. Not really, but they have that reputation. So it's interesting that devil's tails have arrows on them, just like the glyph for Scorpio does. This is a glyph for Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the archer, so this symbol is super easy to remember because archers shoot bows. They don't shoot bows. archers use a bow to shoot arrows. And the symbol for Sagittarius looks like an arrow. Capricorn actually has two glyphs. I don't think either of them looks like a goat. So just like Virgo, the symbols for Capricorn are kind of just something you'll have to remember. To this day, the glyph for Capricorn is the only symbol I cannot draw from memory. So I always do the little tail thing backwards, or it doesn't come out right, because how is this a goat? It doesn't look like a goat at all, at least not to me. If you think it looks like a goat, please tell me how you see that, because I stared at this glyph, I could not see a goat. But long story short, these are the symbols for Capricorn. And, you'll learn them eventually. This is the glyph for Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer, and it's super easy to connect the symbol with the sign of the water bearer, because the symbol looks like, waves of water. And Aquarius is also associated with technology and innovation, and some astrologers even say that the glyph looks like, little electric waves. So either water waves or electric waves. Either way, they're the waves of the Aquarius, and it's super easy to remember. This is the glyph for Pisces. Pisces is the sign of the fish, and the symbol is two fish tied together by the tail and swimming in opposite directions. It doesn't look like that so much in a literal sense, but if you kind of just don't put too much logic into it, you can kind of see the fish tied together. At least that's how my processing works. But yeah, I found the symbol for Pisces pretty easy to remember, so hopefully you will as well. Now we are moving on to the glyphs for the planets. There is lots of interesting information surrounding the origins of where these symbols came from. And the same can be said about the symbols for the signs. I found that, the planets had a little bit more story behind them, and I won't have time to get into all the details of, the history and the origins of each glyph, but I really recommend doing the research yourself, because it really opened my eyes, and, it gives you a deeper meaning of what the planets mean as well. So 10 out of 10 would recommend doing the research about the planetary glyphs, and I will even leave a couple links down below to a couple of articles I read, especially the one about connecting the planetary glyphs to alchemy. That was so interesting to me, and there are a bunch of other symbols there that I won't cover in this video, so if that's something you're interested in, you should read that article. But yes, enough rambling, on to the glyphs of the planets. This is the glyph of the sun. It's a circle with a dot in the middle. Some people say it looks like a boob. I honestly, I can see why they would say that. But really, it represents how the sun is the center of our solar system, And you can think of the outside circle as an orbit, and the little dot in the middle as the sun, and we're orbiting around the sun. So that's pretty simple to remember. This is the glyph of the moon. It's always in a crescent shape, because I don't know why, but yeah, it looks like a moon. It represents the moon, so it's really simple. This is a glyph for Mercury. It has little horns on the top. They're not actual horns, but they're, the little wings of Hermes's helmet. Because, Hermes is the same as Mercury. If we're going from Greek to Roman, Roman to Greek, they're the same god. And so Hermes had little wings, and you can think of those horns on the top of the Mercury glyph as the wings of Hermes. This is the glyph for Venus. You may recognize it as the symbol for female. And in astrology, the planet of Venus does represent femininity and, female people. So it's kind of easy to put those associations together. The symbol for Venus is also described as Aphrodite's mirror, because Venus and Aphrodite are the same god. This is Mars, and Mars, of course, looks like the symbol for males. And Mars represents males and masculinity in astrology, so just like Venus, that's another easy association to put together. When I was looking at this glyph, I also saw, a penis, because of course you got the ball sack and the shaft in the head, and honestly, I'm a little bit of a pervert, so of course I saw a penis. But that is not all I saw. I also saw a shield and a sword, which I thought was interesting. In doing my research, I actually saw it described as a shield and a spear, which, upon a second glance, makes more sense. But yeah, a shield and a pointy weapon. And Mars is, associated with war and combat. So that's another interesting link between the symbol itself and what the planet actually stands for. This is the glyph for Jupiter. There was lots of backstory about the glyph of Jupiter. None of it really helped me connect the glyph to the planet in a concrete way. So I'm just gonna give an example of my own. I think the glyph for Jupiter looks like the number 21. And of course, 21 or blackjack is a game sort of chance, sort of skill. But you can go to Vegas and go to a blackjack table and win really big. And of course, Jupiter is a big planet of luck. So that's how I associate the glyph with Jupiter. This is the glyph for Saturn. And you can see that it looks very similar to the glyph for Jupiter, except it's sideways and flip-flopped. Something else along the lines of Jupiter, I couldn't really find, a quirky connection between how the glyph actually looks with the meanings of the planet of Saturn. So I will again offer my own little tidbit. But yeah, I don't know where I heard this before, but it looks like a cross on a hill. And when I think of a cross, I was raised very Christian, so of course I think of Jesus and how he had to struggle to carry his cross. I was not the best Christian, so I don't remember if he was actually carrying his cross up a hill. But it's a struggle to carry a cross up a hill. A cross doesn't just appear at the top of the hill, it needs to be carried there. And that is a struggle. And Saturn can often indicate where we struggle in life, where we have challenges. So that's kind of how I associate the glyph of Saturn with the planet of Saturn. These are both the glyphs for Uranus. And, I think the one on the right is a little bit more popular, at least to me. I think the other one might be more popular in Europe. Of course, I'm American. But anyways, yeah, I think the one on the right kind of looks like a compass. And what does a compass do? A compass leads us in the right direction of where we need to be going. And that's kind of what Uranus does, except in a more dramatic, sporadic type of way. Uranus will pop out of nowhere and just push us in the direction of positive change and, reform. So it's kind of a little bit of a stretch, but hey, if it can help you remember the glyph for Uranus, I had to give it a shot. This is the glyph for Neptune. It is a trident, and it's super easy to remember because, Neptune and Poseidon were the gods of the sea and the oceans, And I only know that from The Little Mermaid, that Poseidon had a trident. Full disclosure. But yeah, whenever I think of underwater, I think of the Little Mermaid, and he had a trident, and that looks like the Neptune symbol. So it's super easy to remember. These are the two most popular glyphs for Pluto. I think they're very easy to remember because the first one is literally just the first two letters, the P and an L, and that's Pluto. And the second one, I think the second one is a little bit more fun because to me, it looks like a guy standing there who just put his arms up in surrender. And that's kind of what you have to do with Pluto, because Pluto doesn't care if you're surrendering or not. He's just gonna take everything and destroy everything. And it's best when dealing with Pluto if you just surrender and let Pluto do his thing. So that's kind of how I associate the little symbol with, the meaning of Pluto. So yes, those are all the glyphs that you'll need to know in order to read the basics of a birth chart. Of course, there are other celestial bodies that also have their own symbols, but I didn't want to get into all of that. Otherwise, this video probably would have gone on forever. And of course, I do not want that to happen. But yeah, there's so much more information about all these symbols. And like I said in my little, mid-video ramble, doing the research on it, I think will be so worthwhile. I didn't do the research on the glyphs when I first started learning astrology, but actually going back and reading the history, it gives such a deeper understanding of the planets. So I think it's kind of something you'll miss out on if you don't do the research yourself. What I present in this video is just really basic information, and it does not even scratch the surface. There's so much out there to learn. And speaking of all that other stuff that is still out there to learn, in part 2, we will learn, how to start interpreting, because we're going to learn how to read the planets in the signs and how to synthesize the meaning of the planet and the meaning of the sign and to smush it together to get, a big, delicious blob of, a planetary placement. Placements are a lot more beautiful than I just described them. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.